And good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Building a More Productive Cloud, our August 2017 3T at T webcast series. My name is Allen Falcon. I'm the CEO and Pragmatic Evangelist here at Cumulus Global, and I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day, your busy week, to join us here this afternoon. Before we get into the content of today's webcast, a couple of housekeeping items. First and foremost, you've probably noticed that all the phone lines and voice lines are muted. That helps us prevent any unnecessary background noise so we get a good recording. So if you have a question at any point in time, along the top or the right-hand side of your screen, there are a couple of icons. One of them opens a questions window. There's also a chat window, but the questions window is best as it lets me know who's asking the question and it tracks which ones I've answered so we get all of your questions answered before we adjourn here this afternoon. As I mentioned briefly there, the session is being recorded. Generally within 24 hours after the webcast, we'll have this recording processed and uploaded to our website. We'll send you a thank you note for joining us here today, along with the link to the webcast. Feel free to share it with anyone you feel might benefit from the information that we provide here today. As always with this webcast series, we're looking for feedback, not just on how well we do in each individual session, but topics of interest that you might like to know more about. They can be at the strategy or tactical level, they can be at the product level, or they can be technical in nature. So we welcome your suggestions and your feedback. Good suggestions may often make it into our third Tuesday at 3 webcast series. And in some instances, we've created special webcasts just to cover topics suggested by some of our frequent attendees. So please feel free to provide that feedback. So with the housekeeping out of the way, want to get into today's session and talk a little bit about why we are where we are as far as building more productive cloud. And part of what we see when we talk with people about moving their small and mid-sized businesses into cloud environments is we jump quickly from the reasons they want to make that move or believe they want to make that move into a discussion of what licensing is right for them. And with so many options, particularly with Office 365, we see that licensing discussion coming first. And in the process, we see a lot of organizations that sort of lose sight of the value that they're trying to achieve and end up focusing on which level license or which mix of licenses they need. So what we want to do here today is talk about how do you build a more productive cloud and what's involved with that, and really start with a sort of a high-level process diagram, if you will, that has a couple of inputs here. At the top, we see the key inputs for most small and mid-sized businesses. First and foremost, the BGO, your business goals and objectives. Those are most important because those will predominantly drive the business requirements you have. A second one that we can't overlook is security and compliance. And we take a pretty broad definition of security and compliance, and we'll get into that in a few minutes. And finally, there's user needs and preferences. And all these come into play. Now, clearly, business goals and objectives should be what you're trying to achieve for your business at a strategic or a tactical or an operational, even opportunistic at sometimes level, that'll drive business requirements that we can then convert into technical requirements from which we can pick products and we can map the right license type for what you need, and then feed that into an overall solution plan that just goes beyond the what we're installing and why into the how and what are we going to do to make sure you actually get the value from that you were expecting when you said this is our business objective, our business goal that's driving this decision or driving this change. With security and compliance, we talk about clearly security of information is an issue that's top of mind for everyone. We see what's happening with the data breaches. We see what's happening with ransomware and the impact that it's having on small and large businesses alike, as well as the increasing regulation with respect to information privacy. And so depending on what the needs, there's some basic best practices that we always want to implement, but your business may have regulatory requirements or industry standards that you have to adhere to. We want to make sure that those effectively become business requirements that, again, drive those technical requirements. And finally, why is user needs and preferences here? Because we live, in many cases, in the age of BYOD, bring your own device, and even a little more scary to us as technologists, the age of shadow IT, right? So that if we don't understand what our users need and what their preferences are, and we roll out a set of IT services, and that doesn't meet their needs and preferences to a sufficient degree, they're going to go install their own apps and do it on their own, right? It's not uncommon, for example, for us to walk into companies and see employees using personal Dropbox accounts, as an example, to share information or even send proposals on behalf of the company, or attaching third-party tools to their Office 365 or Google Apps environment without permission. People in this day and age, with the ubiquitous nature of apps on mobile devices and as browser extensions and even standalone apps, it's not hard for someone to find an app that they think is going to work for them and install. And in most cases, it's really not that difficult for them to attach it to your corporate information, which is something you probably don't want to have happen. So we want to make sure that user needs and preferences fall into that category of business requirements. And so what I'm going to do today in this webcast is sort of talk about those three inputs and what happens as we go down the funnel, if you will, to come out with a solution plan that you can then say yes or no, we want to implement this. And those three factors come into play with others for your business requirements. We then map business requirements into technical requirements. And I'll talk about the difference here because for a lot, if you talk to technology vendors and other resellers like ourselves, oftentimes the line between business and technical requirements gets blurred, and they end up focusing on the technology and not the business solution. Once you have your technical requirements, it's easier to identify the product mix you need to have in place to meet those technical requirements, and that you can make if your core platform, whether it's Office 365 or G Suite, how we get that into the right license level for you there. And finally, a solution plan that sort of goes beyond the nuts and bolts, and is more of the instruction plan of how we're going to put together and how we make sure people are going to use it to the greatest effectiveness. So step one of the process is to take those business goals and objectives, your security and compliance needs, and your user needs and preferences, along with other business factors, and really drive those business requirements. And so when we talk about business goals and objectives, what am I talking about? I'm talking about those things at a high level, right? And SMART is often the acronym for a good goal. It's specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based, right? So when we look at business goals and objectives, it's not saying, hey, we want to move to the cloud, or we want faster email, or we want more shared calendaring, or I want to be able to share files more easily. That's fine. For us, that's a technical requirement. Why do you need those, right? Why do you want to share files? Why do you need some sort of managed workflow? What is the business issue that's driving that need? And it's important for us to understand those goals and objectives, because with those in mind, it gives us greater perspective as far as the solution, the technical requirements we develop, and the solutions we end up recommending and providing. So here's an example of some goals and objectives that we've worked on with other customers, clients of ours in the recent past. So, and when you look at these, you can see these really don't talk about the technology at all. These are true business goals and objectives. And so when we looked at, improve time to deliver proposals from, get it down from 3 days to 3 hours, that was a huge transition that this consulting firm wanted to make. And we talked to them about, well, what would make that easier to do, right? Well, it'd make it easier if we had full proposal templates, a library of past proposals we could cut and paste from, tools to build documents from template components. It would be great to have an automated quote review and approval workflow, so that once someone drafted a proposal, it could get in front of the right eyes and be reviewed and approved or modified or sent back for modifications fairly quickly. And we asked them, did they have those things? And they're like, well, yeah, we have all of our past proposals, but they're just, they're in a file server. And, not everyone knows which proposal existed. It's not easy to search. People don't necessarily have access to all of our past proposals. So oftentimes if you as an individual salesperson have worked with a similar company, you might pull one of those past proposals out. But we don't have templates for what we want going forward that we manage as the business evolves. That would make it easier. And it would be great as if we had a library of, not just the boilerplate like limitation of liability and jurisdiction and all the, the T's and C's, but, even had easily customizable templates about each product or each service we offer that we could then include in the proposal in mix and match. Okay, and so in talking about the business requirements and what it would mean to satisfy those requirements, we got to set, we took a business goal and got those requirements out. When we talked to another customer about lowering their customer acquisition cost by, 25%, they were, they saw a couple of areas. One, their marketing and their sales weren't automated very much at all, so there was a lot of manual work and spreadsheet management, a lot of wasted time. They were they'd have to enter a customer and their personal contacts into the CR system and ERP system separately. Again, time waste, constantly projects to synchronize data and correct errors. They felt that if they could differentiate when someone requested information from them, right? Most people in their industry would send an email back with a number of attachments, anywhere from 5 to 15 attachments with product specs and pictures and information sheets. They wanted something that differentiated from the market that would make the customer more likely to engage with them as a company. And they realized that they were spending a lot of money on online meeting services. And they actually had both a mix of WebEx and GoToMeeting, and they're paying per user per month to support the conference calls and the video calls and the online screen shares, if you will, of presentations. And so again, business objective is lower that customer acquisition cost by 25%. It came into a set of business requirements that are a little more specific. What business things, processes, technologies do you need to change in order to attain that? Similarly, for shortening the sales cycle by 20%, this company felt that their salespeople struggled to get the right info and literature on. They weren't able easily to do demos and webcasts or point people to things that have been priorly recorded, and they wanted to differentiate themselves with storytelling as a sales method and tool. Okay, so that's business goals and objectives and how we take those and create those business requirements. The second area where we generate our business requirements is really security compliance, and it comes to every company at 4 levels. First, you may have a regulatory requirement, and this could be what I call the big rules like HIPAA, or if you're a large enough company, Sarbanes-Oxley, right? Security exchange compliance with Rule 17, 17A 1 through 4, FINRA. It actually falls into the next category, which is industry standards. And these are security and privacy standards that are required to operate within a certain industry. So we put PCI, personal card information, and FINRA and other industry standards and requirements into that label as well. And at the regulatory label, we certainly have the national U.S. standards like HIPAA, high tech, high health, and others, but we also now have state level regulations. For example, we're located in Massachusetts, which has a pretty extensive personally identifiable information, or PII, set of regulations with some pretty draconian penalties if you breach. We see that with other state and local jurisdictions as well. And if you do business with consumers or companies in the EU, the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations goes into effect next May, and so the clock is ticking to be ready for that. Beneath that, there are still just best practices, things you should be doing to secure information, to keep it private, to manage access to information even within your own organization. And then there's the standard policies and procedures that you have as a company itself, whether or not they're driven by a regulation and industry standard or just a desire to be best practice. And that can be everything from data retention to a whole suite of services. So when we look at regulatory industry standards, these tend to hit the compliance, security, and privacy portion of your business. When we look at best practices and standards procedures, it's security, it's privacy, it's also what are you going to do for data loss prevention. And data loss prevention isn't just the breach that's a compliance issue. Or an industry standard regulation issue. It's making sure that your intellectual property stays private. It's making sure that customer lists aren't accidentally exposed to a competitor. It's making sure that you're not hacked from the outside, as well as protection and recovery. And this comes into play particularly with the ongoing and ever-increasing threat of ransomware, not only your ability to protect yourself from such an attack, but should you fall victim to an attack, be able to recover. And the recovery extends beyond ransomware to hardware, software failures, to data corruption from third-party applications or applications, as well as user accident or intentional behavior. And so we see security and compliance being a big driver of those business requirements, and it's a good idea to quantify those and get those down. And finally, the user needs and preferences comes into play. And here's where we get this is a lot softer in some respect, right? Because it's, what devices do your people use? What devices do you want them to use? How important and what's the role of mobility? What about application usability? And even the range of apps you're offering. And how do your people like to work with respect to email, telephony, conferencing, access to information, whether it's an internal ERP system or files in a file service or on a file server somewhere? What kind of support do your people want and need? And all of these sort of softer things come into play in understanding your workforce and the communication generations that may exist, impact you. And within that structure of those user needs and preferences, you have an organization. How do you want to organize this? What level of control and administration do you need? How much management do you need to have over the environment in which your employees are working? And again, here, the goal is to strike the balance, right? So that you have an organized IT environment with proper administration, management, and control that's robust enough in the user's mind and easy enough to use in the individual worker's mind that they don't intentionally or accidentally circumvent you and go with their own, shadow IT services, that you're meeting their needs and their ability to conduct your business. And so a lot of this is sort of matching the tools to the culture of the company and to the style of your workers, and to a certain extent on an individualized basis, as much as it is planning for that central management and control. So we take those business requirements, and next we create those technical requirements. I want to go back to some of our examples, right? And so we had a business goal that generated the following, some of these, business goals that generated some business requirements. So how does that become a technical requirement, right? So if you want to automate quote review and approval workflow, then yes, you need a workflow automation tool or system in place to do that. It's obviously easier than you could build your own, but why? They're out there, they're available. And part of that technical requirement would be it has to integrate with the file store. So you're not actually moving an electronic copy of the document through each phase of the workflow. The document sits in one place and the workflow utilizes it. An email for notifications and follow-up, calendar for things that are supposed to be scheduled, or tasks and to-do systems, or even project, task and project management tools could be an integration point to manage deadlines and the flow and send alerts and escalate things if things start to fall behind. Building documents from template components was another business requirement that we came up with based on a higher level goal or objective. And here, yes, we're talking about a couple of options. One way could be to go with a quote or proposal automation tool that lets you pull from templates in a product catalog or even from your distributors or wholesalers that you work with. Another approach could be a technical requirement for a content automation tool with template formats, content components that you can pick and choose from, and the ability to manage that sort of signature and ordering process as well with electronic signatures could be the technical requirements for that. Now, this is obviously very high level, and which would work for your organization sort of depends on the types and quotes and proposals you're doing for this type of example. It sort of gives a better sense of going business to technical. Similarly, we talked about replacing expensive meeting services. We need a voice and or video service. It should integrate with our calendar and our email and our file store, because those are all components that we'll want to use. And for this customer, it was really important that they had screen and application sharing available, and that it offered the people the ability to dial in, dial out, that it wasn't just a Skype type native service where you have to be on a computer or a mobile device that's internet connected to participate in a conference call. They wanted people to be able to dial in, understanding they wouldn't participate in screen sharing, but it could, at least could use that component for audio conferences and for the audio portion of video workshops and conferences as well. And finally, differentiating with storytelling, that led to a technical requirement to come up with a new publishing tool. They wanted that tool to have Web 2.0 look and feel results, so material design, highly scrollable and responsive in that it would look appropriate on a cell phone or smartphone as well as it would on a 15 or 21 or 27-inch monitor on someone's desk. And this had to integrate with the file store for managing attachments and email for sharing the story, and the published works in a trackable, manageable way. So again, high level map, that business to technical, and then from there we can start to select products and licenses. And I'll just do this at the very base level, and I can even talk about some of those other factors that we talked about earlier, in some of the other examples that we've been following through. So with Office 365, if you have a sense of your business requirements, you can start looking at business and or enterprise-grade licenses. And there's multiple licenses within those suite. So there's certain demographic factors, right? The business licenses are limited to 300 users each. So you could have, you could have a 600-person company on Office 365 business level with half at Business Premium and half at, 300 at Business Premium and 300 at Business Essentials, but that's it, you're done, right? But there are other reasons you would pick between, business or enterprise. The enterprise licenses come with Office, some of them come with Office 2016 Pro Plus, which includes access and some other desktop applications that aren't in the standard version of Office that comes with the business licenses. The enterprise licenses, you can add Microsoft's telephony services to the mix, which gives you some nice value add capabilities if that's the direction you need to go in. The enterprise version also has privacy and digital rights and some AI around that, as well as the ability to do legal holds and other archive and e-discovery services that aren't in the business version, right? And so understanding not only your business goals and objectives to determine what licenses or mix of licenses come into play, but your security and compliance requirements. And there are times that we have, customers that look at this and they say, you know what, we could, while the security and compliance components that are built into the E3 Enterprise Level 3 license of Office 365 is great, the needs of our business are really met with Business Premium. We'll add a third-party service for that email archive and e-discovery capability. And that third-party service will provide some continuity service. It'll provide additional layer of spam and virus protection and malware protection. It's a way to, it's another way to work the solution. The other aspect of Office 365 are specialty licenses that Microsoft, is currently in the process of reworking. Some have already been announced. So, for example, Microsoft used to have two what were known as kiosk licenses for deskless or systemless workers, right? Those were combined into one, and now they've been repackaged as what's known as the F1 license or the frontline worker. This is an enterprise-grade license designed for frontline workers who aren't at a computer during the day. So it could be delivery and field service personnel. It could be folks who work on the floor of your distribution center or on the manufacturing line. This is a lower cost license. We like it because it's low cost. It's got a much smaller mailbox capacity, but those employees with that F1 license still have access to your internal and shared, SharePoint infrastructure. They have access to OneDrive, so they can access files. They can still use Skype for Business to participate in online meetings, in voice and video conferencings, or even one-to-one video conversations. Their access to email is through the Outlook web service or through active sync on a mobile device or POP3. So again, it assumes they're not going to be running Outlook on a desktop anywhere. Their mailbox is smaller. Their needs are generally smaller, but you can still provide them access to the other collaboration information tools in the suite. That's one example. The other aspect of Office 365 are the add-ons. So for us, for example, a standard add-on that we always recommend is Advanced Threat Protection. Why? It adds a quarter of a second to the delivery time of an email message, but all inbound email that has links in it, those links are actually opened in a behind the scenes in a sandbox environment, a honeypot, if you will, and tested, and attachments are open to look for malware. So this dramatically reduces your risk of ransomware or other types of viral infections. And then, of course, there's third-party integrations, and what do you run? So with Office 365, the specific license you need. Oh, if your ERP system is SQL Server based and you want to do data analytics with Power BI, or you want to connect it to Delve, so when you search for customer records out of that system come up, as well as files in OneDrive and on your local file server. All of that comes into play as to which license mix is best to you, and what third-party applications you need. The G Suite environment's a little different, right? A little less integrated as far as scope of services, as Office 365. So the first decision is business, enterprise, or basic, right? And right now, really, the go-to license for the vast majority of companies running G Suite is going to be the business license. It's the one with, not just unlimited storage and the compliance tools for email and document archiving and legal holds and discovery, but it's got, the ability, it's got team drives for organizing information so that it's owned by the company and not individual users. As far as account ownership goes, and permissions management gives you that centralized control that you're often looking for without ruining the peer-to-peer sharing capability of the drive environment. It's got App Maker coming, which is the tool that lets you build scripts and automate workflows in a no-code, low-code scenario, and has those other features that most businesses need, whereas Basic is now, relatively speaking, a stripped-down traditional version of G Suite that really just focuses on email, calendar, contacts, and peer-to-peer file storage. The Enterprise Edition is a step up from business. It has additional data loss prevention. It's got additional capabilities such as dial in, dial out into Google Hangouts, now known as Meet, so that you can have dial-in participants to your Hangouts. G Suite, as we've talked about earlier, is the philosophy that it provides the cornerstone of your foundation of the cloud, but that you're going to build your cloud ecosystem using best fit and best of breed products for your business, for your industry. So third-party integrations can be, for me, at the infrastructure level. Like, we have a number of folks who use Uber Conference to do their audio and video conferencing because the business edition of G Suite plus Uber Conference is less than the enterprise edition of G Suite, where you don't have that feature to allow people to dial in to a Google Hangout or a Google Meet session. Third-party integrations can be things like ProsperWorks, the CRM system we work with, that automatically pulls information out of emails and other documents so you're not re-entering user information, and actually operates from a window within your Gmail home screen. And so, at this point, with those technical requirements, you can pick the products you're going to mix with your Office 365 or G Suite environment, as well as the right licensing within those to provide the most cost-effective solution. And finally, that leads us to the solution plan. This is where sort of the rubber meets the road. And obviously, the solution plan is going to take those products and licenses that we've worked out previously and bring it in, and then it's going to cover the deployment. What has to be done technically to do the deployment? What are we looking at in terms of data migration and system setup? Communications is key. Are people aware of what's happening and why and how it's going to impact them and what's next for them? Are the users able to use what we're putting in? And what's interesting is when oftentimes even when we move people from on-premise Microsoft services to Office 365, the feedback is, oh, well, we've been using Microsoft Office, we know what we're doing, when in reality it is a different type of ecosystem, and you've got capabilities that let you operate more efficiently in the web version than you would be able to historically, given the capabilities. The best example is people with on-site Exchange servers and file servers tend to attach a file to an email to route it around for feedback or review. That's great in Office 365 with OneDrive. When you share that document out of OneDrive, you're sending a link, and everyone's looking at the only copy of that document, and it makes revision management, co-editing, review process much more efficient and much more manageable. Again, users need to be aware that a slight change in their behavior has a positive impact. And that really gets us to overall utilization. And what we've learned is that utilization and end user productivity can be 30% to 60% greater with ongoing education and support than without it as you move your employees into the cloud. And that's a huge difference, right? That's a huge impact that ongoing effectively utilization support, or what we sometimes know as adoption support, if that's done in a somewhat ongoing basis, you get a lot more value for the money you're spending getting yourself into the cloud. And it's that way for a couple of reasons. The cloud is changing rapidly as far as capabilities. People may not be aware of what's there. If they are aware, they may not be comfortable yet or understand how to use it or how they can use it in their environment. So just using Office 365 as an example, in 2016 there were 60 features, and some of those were small, some of them were huge, like Delve, Sway, which were complete applications, Groups, which is a whole communication and sharing construct, and Clutter. Through the middle of 2017, there were 55 features already released for the first 6 months of the year. Some of those are coming out this quarter or next quarter, but they've been announced or released. And Microsoft has acknowledged as many as, last count, 154 new features in development, promised in futures updates. Some of those will hit this year, some might not hit until 2018, but it's out there. Microsoft is setting the expectation. That's a lot of new capability to digest by any one person. And so having as part of your solution plan what you're going to do for support, and how you're going to keep your employees aware that there's more available in the ecosystem that might help them in their jobs, and present that to them in a way that it's acceptable and they feel they can adopt it. And that really means putting a system in place where your salespeople might see different utilization support and ideas and suggestions than your finance people, who should see something different than your field service technicians, or your marketing staff, right, or your facilities organization, whatever it might be. And so we really look to feel that's an emerging important aspect of a really successful deployment of cloud, whether it's Office 365 or G Suite at the foundation. And to that line, a little heads up, over the next couple of weeks, we'll be announcing a new set of services around providing that ongoing utilization and adoption support, and expansion, and getting that 30 to 60% efficiency and productivity bump that's possible. So I've covered a lot of ground. I've talked pretty fast. I think my slides had too many words and not enough pictures. So at this point, I do want to open this up to questions. So again, along the top or right-hand side of the screen, there's an icon. Open up the questions window and fire away if you have any questions that come to mind. So one of the questions we often get, particularly for companies that haven't yet moved into cloud, is which cloud is right for them. And we actually have an ebook on our website in the resource library section about picking your productivity cloud that talks about several factors that come into play. And yes, we talk about business goals and objectives. We talk about legacy systems, about your user community and company culture, what type of file structure you need for information management. There are 5 or 6 factors that we discuss in that ebook. That's a good place to start. If you want to move to the cloud and you're a little further down the road and are looking for specific recommendations, if you go to our website, one of the services we offer is Which Cloud Survey, or effectively an assessment. We have a survey. It is not a short little marketing set of questions. This is a survey that will take 40 to 60 minutes to complete. Most people it takes about 45. Yes, there's some multiple choice, there's some pull downs, there's a lot of long answer. The more detail you provide us in the long answer, the better we can do. We'll take the information you provide and we'll generate an assessment report, We'll provide feedback, and we'll make a set of recommendations that we justify. And we'll justify that in the report we hand to you, and then we'll get on a half-hour to 45-minute call with you to walk through our recommendations and the justification behind them, answer any questions you have. Oftentimes, our customers will provide additional information that may tweak our recommendations a little bit, and then you walk away with that plan. That's normally a service we sell for about $900 as a fixed price consulting service. Through the end of August, we're offering that for free. So if you have questions about that, let me know, or hit our website. There's actually a form where you can request it. You can just even go on the website and fill out the survey, and we'll get you your feedback and assessment and recommendations generally within 72 hours. There's some work we do on our side, so it does take a little bit of time to turn that around. So we don't have any questions yet. Another, from the audience, but another question we get when we talk about, building a more productive cloud is, how do you integrate, and pick services based on the culture and who's involved in your company. And one of the things we like to do is, we point out that, most companies have 4 generations of workers in them. The in-person meeting, the telephone call or conference call, the emailer, and the chatter, right, the texter. And you can pretty much guess by generation who falls into what. So it's important that the folks in your company can use the communication tools that they're most comfortable with, with which they'll be most productive, but also allow them to, to communicate with one another in a pretty seamless way. And that's where tools, for example, when we look at, Skype for Business, for example, on the Office 365 side. Great, it is instant messaging with presence information. So even if you're going to send someone an email, Skype for Business can tell you if they're busy or available or out of the office or do not disturb mode, or they've put up a special status to make you aware before you even try to communicate. You can start with an instant message. Hey, are you available? You can communicate back and forth. If need be, you can easily jump into that video conference. You can make an audio call and speak by phone effectively, computer to computer, or you can jump in and have that video conference, share your screen, share your application, and even share access control, for real-time editing of a document or materials. And so the communication can flow really naturally between 2 people as if they were in the same room, even though they're not, right? And it's device independent, which sort of exemplifies the fact that, hey, Dave may be working from home on an iPad, and I can be in the office on my laptop connected to my big extra screens, and we can still work together and collaborate as if we were sitting across the table from each other in a conference room with that level of efficacy. But when we look at building the productivity cloud, a lot of people say that, well, that's great. And then they'll say, oh, but I need WebEx so I can do, have dial-in conference, or I need a telephone conferencing service, or I need WebEx so I can do dial-in conferencing and do more sophisticated screen sharing. And what we'll point out then is, hey, for a couple bucks a month per person who needs it, we can add telephony connectivity to Skype for meetings, for Skype for Business, so that whenever you invite someone to a Skype for Business meeting that you're setting up, or even if you have one in a chat that turns into a video meeting, you can add and provide a dial-in number so people can call in, or you can set it up that at the meeting time, the Skype for Business system actually calls your attendees. And that kind of small change to the environment can have a massive impact on productivity. The fact that when I'm scheduling, if I'm on the phone with someone and we schedule a meeting, that meeting invite automatically includes the voice and video and conferencing with the dial-in number as the option, means I then don't have to get off the phone and go to another system and generate, the meeting invite and everything like that. The separate invite's going to go. I have to cut and paste the information into my calendar entry, and that gets sent out as an update to to the person I'm meeting with. It makes for it makes for a smoother environment. So we've got a couple of questions that have come in. The first one is there a solution to data integrity and protection through best practices and standard operating procedures to lower the probability of a data issue? Do firms such as yours have SOPs, manuals, or help in preparing how employees treat data? And the answer is yes, there are things you can do through best practices to improve data integrity. A couple of them are at the administrative level, which is one, actively managing permissions and access to data. And that is not just by the end user, right? So certainly, if I'm working on a project, I need to be able to edit documents on those projects. People not working on the projects shouldn't have edit access. They should only have read access. Or if it's a confidential project, they should have no access at all. So the first thing you do to minimize accidental damage to data or even intentional damage to data is to limit access to the data and the ability to edit that data or remove it only to people who should have the authority to edit or remove that data. The other point of managing access to documents comes from the hidden side, which shouldn't be so hidden, but surprisingly a lot of people don't recognize it, and that's third-party applications, right? In fact, just over the weekend, my 11-year-old son, he plays video games, and he's really looking for a good tool that'll capture the screen while he's playing and let him narrate what he's doing. He's done it a little bit with a mediocre tool. He posts it on YouTube. He's got some followers. He's having fun with it. It seems, pretty exciting for him. Well, that's great. So he asked me to check out a tool. So I go to my iPhone to install the tool to see what it's like. It recognizes, it's looking at my iPhone, and it recognizes that I have a G Suite account, and it asks for permission to my account. Now I'm, a geek and I'm techie, so I read what it's looking for. It wanted permission, not only, to send me an alert by notification, but it wanted access to all of my contacts, and it wanted read and write access to all of my files in Drive. Now I understand why it might be asking for write permission so it can save videos that I make in Drive, but that's a lot of permission to give a third-party application, and some applications aren't so benign. So having tools in place that limit access of third-party apps to your data is another mechanism. The third component really comes into a communication, and we've actually done another webcast on this that talks about CPR as a way of preventing and managing ransomware, right, or other data integrity issues. Communication, which is really about training and education, so that your employees understand what the risks are, the potential damage those risks can do, and the behaviors they need to change to help prevent that from happening. It means you've got the P, is protection in place and prevention, which are tools that minimize the risk. So, data level protection from virus and malware, as opposed to just device or endpoint. Proper firewalling of your physical systems and logical firewalling, if you will, for your cloud-based systems, all come into play. Managing those third-party application permissions, managing privacy control, having something that monitors data loss, prevention to prevent user accidents or accidental disclosures from happening, all come into place. And then the R is the recovery, that should something happen and the integrity of data be compromised, that you have the ability to recover the data back to a useful state. And all of those need to be in place. So another question is, we use Office 365 and Google Calendar. This doesn't seem to be that effective as it adds a second step. Invites can't be accepted and have to be manually added to Google Calendar. Would you recommend using Outlook Calendar, and how difficult would it be to switch? Yes, so if you're using, it's challenging now when people say they're using Office 365 because it's which Office 365. So if it's Office 365 Business or Pro Plus, that's just a fancy name for the desktop installed version of Office 365. And the question then, where's your email service coming from? Is it coming from G Suite and you're using Gmail but just through Outlook? Is your email client? And is that why you're using Google Calendar? So there are a couple of things. If the only part of Office 365 you're using is the desktop applications of Microsoft Office and you're using Outlook for email, and you're having trouble with Google Calendar, chances are we can do a better connection between you and the G Suite backend so that email actually works better and calendar works better. If you're using Office 365 Business Essentials, Business Premium, or any of the enterprise licensing, and you've got all of the capability of using the calendar within Outlook, or really within the mail service or the Office 365 service, if you will, we would recommend doing that. It's very easy to set up, and it's not that difficult to make the switch and to migrate your existing calendar content into the Office from the Google Calendar into the Office 365 calendar ecosystem as well. It's something we do as a standard part of our migration when we bring new customers on board. So hopefully that answered that question. I think I answered the second question in a more succinct version than the first. We don't have any more questions at this point in time, and we're well past 45 minutes into the hour. So I want to thank everyone for spending time this afternoon attending the webcast, or if you're listening to the recording, for listening to the recording and taking time to view the webcast and hear what we have to say. I always appreciate folks taking time to participate in our community. Your feedback is necessary and more than welcome. Positive, critical, or downright negative, it's all valued and all taken to heart. We want these sessions to be as valuable as possible for those of you who attend. If you have any further questions or want more information, the general contact info for Cumulus Global is info@cumulusglobal.com. Also on your screen, you have my email. This doesn't go to an administrative assistant. It comes into my inbox. You have our toll-free number and the direct line to my desk. And if I'm traveling and taking calls, my cell phone as well. That number travels with me. So if you feel free to contact the company, contact me. I will help you, or I connect you with someone within the company, one of our cloud advisors or a member of our operations or service teams will help you out, help you answer your questions and solve your problems. We'll be posting next month's webcast in a couple days. I've been traveling, so I'm a little behind schedule in getting that all set up. Again, we will have a copy of this recording available on the website, if not by end of day today, sometime midday tomorrow. We just need to get the video processed, uploaded, and embedded in the website. And you can feel free to share that with folks if you think it would be valuable to them as well. Again, thank you for joining us this afternoon, and have a great day.